Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank all of y'all for being here. And I promise you we'll be brief and try to get through this 5 minutes as quickly as we can. But I want to ask you, our current tax code, and I think most people would agree, it's built on government control, and it's built on trying to control actions of people and what they do. I've served in a number of different capacities. I've been a mayor, I've been a state legislator, and now I serve in Congress. I started when I was 10, so that explains that. But nevertheless, I've always noticed that people, given the choice between a property tax or an income tax, that they don't like taxes, but given that choice, they would prefer a consumption tax. Are you familiar, any of you familiar with the FairTax? Can you tell me, I'm the sponsor of the FairTax. The FairTax was started in the late 90s by John Linder, and then Rob Woodall, who was his chief of staff at the time, became a member after John left. Rob took his place, and then when Rob left, he asked me if I would carry it, and I did, and I'm proud to. It was the very first bill that I sponsored when I became a member of Congress. And tell me, if you will, what you think about a consumption tax and about specifically the FairTax in that proposal.
I think consumption taxes are good policy. I think that in general, they are less distortive than the income tax. They do not discourage investment. They do not discourage saving. And if they're structured well, they can reduce non-compliance in the tax system. The FairTax in particular, I think the policy, the heart is in the right place, but I think structurally...
Well, what would you change? Tell me, how can I make it better?
So I think the fundamental weakness of the FairTax is that it's a retail sales tax. I think retail sales taxes, they're collected all at the very last point in the chain of production at the retailer. And as a result, all the revenue is collected at that point, which creates a pretty significant incentive to avoid the tax, especially if the rate is high enough to replace current revenues. And I actually have a recent paper that I did that estimated how high the tax rate would need to be under the FairTax to replace current
And what did you
revenues.
come up with?
And with a reasonable amount of avoidance, which I think might be on
And do you think we have any avoidance in the current tax system?
So the current tax code does have avoidance, but I think any tax system has avoidance. And
But you think that the FairTax would have more avoidance than?
Well, in our paper, we assumed that it would have just the same amount as the
Okay,
current tax
fair
system.
enough,
We
fair
found
enough.
The
Continue
tax
on.
rate would have to be in the high 30% in order to cover the current tax revenue. So at a rate that high, I think a retail sales tax.
And what do we have it at?
Sorry?
In the proposal, do you know what it's at?
So in the proposal, you have two rates. You have a standard rate and a variable rate for the trust funds, and those in the first year add up to a tax-inclusive rate of 23%.
Right.
The tax-exclusive rate is closer to 29 or 30%.
Right.
But that would be insufficient to cover current revenues. Plus,
How do you base that assumption on that it would be inconsistent?
sorry.
How do you base that consumption to be inconsistent to replace what we currently have in revenue?
So we did our estimates based on national accounts. So this was using BEA data and IRS data.
Okay, let me cut to the chase. What would you do differently? How would you improve it?
So I think first.
Because would you agree, first of all, people prefer a consumption tax and that people would have
personally
control?
I would prefer a consumption tax.
And this would
over
give
an
people
income tax.
control as opposed to the government having control.
So I think that one of the weaknesses is that you're resting the entire tax code on a single tax, which can create problems with avoidance. I think having multiple taxes is good. And second, I think you can improve over
You
a
might be
retail
alone in
sales
that,
tax.
in that
I
assumption.
think you can improve over a retail sales tax with a value-added tax. Under a value-added tax, you'd be collecting the same amount as under a retail sales tax, but it would be done each stage in the production process. So if there's avoidance,
Okay.
it only ends up being a small amount of avoidance.
All right. Anybody else want to comment real quick? I'm sorry.
I agree with those comments. I'll just add further, what the VAT does, it has a bad reputation because it comes from Europe.
Yes.
But what they're doing makes a lot of sense, which is removing the cascading effect of sales taxes on business inputs as they go through the production process.
Well,
Retail
look,
sales tax, you know, has this
I'm
cascading
appealing
effect.
to you. I want help. I want to make this even better. So help me.
That's the best, the
Some
single
of-
best thing, in my view, that you could do to that is remove that cascading effect of taxes on business inputs.
Okay. All right. Well, we're hopefully going to be taking this up. So I need your help and I want your input. So I'm appealing to you to help me with that. Thank y'all. Appreciate it. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.